Hello again, Michael Ware with the Iowa Firearms Coalition. We're bringing to you Warrior Wednesday. Today we have Augie McLamb from Grumpy G.I gear. Now let me read this to set the stage for you guys. I think you're going to like this. So hold on. Meet Grumpy, veteran owned. This is right off his website, which is grumpygigear.com. Veteran owned and veteran run, we founded Grumpy G.I gear out of a desire to annoy the left and right establishments, celebrate America's founding principles, encourage the timid, mock the woke, ridicule the corrupt, and wish a pox on arrogant public officials who violate their oaths of office. We are brash and scrappy, but do not take ourselves too seriously. So at Grumpy G.I gear, we are the counterculture. I like all of that. This is going to be great.
Well, thank you. And you can see from my shirt, we do not take ourselves too seriously. We do touch on serious topics, but we like to have fun while we're doing it.
Fantastic. Okay, so give me the background here. One day you woke up and said, this is who I've been, this is who I am, this is where I'm going, or this is where I want to go. I mean, how does one, first of all, so you're a merchant, you're making goods and selling them, but what happened before that? Give me some background.
I spent 24 years in the Army, 20 active duty, 4 National Guard. When I retired from the Army, I went to work for DOD as a contractor. I kind of liked the job. I was working training and evaluating National Guard units. It was a fun job. But I started seeing a lot of things I didn't like. A lot of corruption in DOD. And most importantly was the lack of courage by retirees, whether they were special forces, active duty infantrymen. There was just a lack of courage by retirees. They were so intent on keeping their jobs that they were afraid to speak up about issues. For example, this whole thing with the tranny issue. People were so afraid to speak up because they don't want to lose their jobs. And some of these jobs, these DOD contracting jobs, are very, very well paying. Yeah. So they preferred to stay silent when they knew that the policies that Obama and the Biden administration were implementing were, detrimental to the military. So I just got tired of that. My contract ran out. And I decided, I'm 58 years old. The last few years of my life, I want to go out with a bang. I want to annoy people. I want to stir stuff up. And I thank you for telling me a few days ago to not curse. So I'll remember that. But I wanted to stir stuff up. I want to stir stuff up. I've always been like that. I grew up in New York City, grew up fighting all the time. I got mugged a few times. There was a period of my life when I was having a fist fight. It seemed like every week. And so I grew up, that background. I live in Texas right now where there's a lot of gentlemen and gentleladies here. Yeah. But I just love to fight. And I don't physically fight because I'm a broken veteran. But, man, I like to stir stuff up. And when I wear a shirt like this in public, it brings up a lot of conversations. More often than not, I get a thumbs up. But there's always a dirty stare. Anyway, that's where I come from. I just like to stir stuff up, and especially in my later years, and I especially like to do it in church.
Okay, so I have got a question. I want to go back, if it's okay. I've got a question about something you said, and then I've got a statement to make. I want to see what you think about it. The question is, when you were talking about DOD contractors having a lack of courage, are you saying that manifested itself because they knew or suspected or felt compelled to speak up, but they shouldn't or couldn't? So my question is, was that pressure overt, or was it right in their face? You can't do this or else. I'm curious how that works.
It was both. I mean, DOD, whether you're in the military or not, you can attend political events. You can. It's allowed. But a lot of these contractors and military personnel, they're so afraid to, they take these rules where there's one rule that says, hey, you cannot overtly put a sign up in your office that says, I support Donald Trump or I support Barack Obama. So they take that and they say, well, that means because I can't put up a sign that says I support Donald Trump, they take that as I'm not allowed to talk about politics at all.
Mhm.
So it's not really not overt. If they read the fine print, they are allowed to speak about political issues. But most of the people in the military, whether in uniform or not, they just prefer to toe the line and not stir the pot and just live a safe life.
Mhm.
So, yes, sometimes it is overt, and sometimes they just prefer to live a safe, quiet, meek life. They just don't want to jeopardize their high-paying jobs. And a lot of these contractors make, a lot of them, not all, a lot of them make well over six figures.
Mhm.
So they just, they just prefer, I'm just going to toe the line, not cause any trouble, go to work, punch the clock, and depart.
Yeah. Okay, I follow. So you're saying life's easier when you go along.
Exactly. And that's
Okay.
exactly how DOD has always been.
Okay. All right. I think I understand that. Okay. So the statement is, it hasn't been that many years ago. I don't know how to categorize this, but essentially my wife says to me, why are you so critical? And don't you understand that you'll make, the adage about drawing more flies with honey than vinegar type of thing, right? And I said, well, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think there's any problem with being critical. And I'm quite certain we're encouraged to be critical, whether that's just through be discerning or it's a biblical concept or whatever it may be. I'm doing this, but I tried to explain to my wife, and she knew this, but she was basically saying there's a price to pay for doing that. Don't you understand that? And I did understand it. So I said, what folks don't understand about me, or what many don't, and about people like you and me, us, if you will, is that being critical doesn't mean that we're anti something. I'm being critical because I want to focus on what's going on here, and I want to see if there's actually inherent truth associated with your statement or your action or whatever else. No more, no less. But because I'm critical of something doesn't mean I'm against it. This is what's happening in common culture. If you question something, then you're a hater. You know what I mean? And
Right.
That is such a stupid, ignorant thing to think. I can be critical of my own movement, and you and I should be, without being anti-Second Amendment. And I think we should be critical of our movement because we need to do these things well. And so it's a thing out there. We need to brand these people haters, and then we're going to get the culture to pounce on them and cancel them, whatever else. And it's moving away from decency to mob mentality. And so when people push back on that, I see some of your shirts and I see the message that it sends. There's some of them on there with respect I probably would never buy or never wear. And there's a lot of them I'm like, I like that a lot. Not only is that hilarious, that might make people think. So I have an appreciation for this stuff naturally. And what do you have to say about that statement, I guess, is my question.
Well, man, there's a lot to pick apart. I just want you to know that I do a lot of gun shows all over Texas. I started moving out. I've done a few in Tennessee, South Carolina, Phoenix. And when it comes to my shirts and people willing to wear them, I find that women are more likely to wear my apparel than men are.
Really?
And yes. Almost inevitably, women will come up to my table and say, I like that shirt. I'm going to wear it. For example, the T-shirt that I have on my site says, hang your local pedophile. Hang your local pedo. 9 times out of 10, an old grandma or mom will wear it. The husband or the man in the group is less likely to. They're reluctant to wear it. And I still have to figure out why that is, that women, and again, I'm not painting a broad brush across America. I'm just telling you what I experience at gun shows, that the women tend to be a lot bolder about stuff like this.
Wow.
And I don't understand why. It could be, it could be that men have been pounded on and beat to the ground about toxic masculinity. I don't understand, but the women are more likely to wear them. You're familiar with the iconic Trump image of him raising his fist after he got shot in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I produced several signs, yard signs, which I sold all over the South. And the person that I sold that sign to was Hispanics. The white males that would come by my table would not buy those signs. I got the excuse that, I don't want to put this up in my front yard. I don't want to have any trouble. But I sold that sign, I would say 90% of the time I sold it to a Hispanic male or Hispanic couple that were not afraid to put that sign in their yard. And I'm trying to figure out, why is that? Why was the white male so afraid to put a yard sign like that in front of their yard? Trump only took a bullet for us. And putting a sign, I didn't think it was too much to ask to put a sign of such an iconic image in your front yard. But anyway, women were more likely to buy that sign and put them in their front yard. Hispanics were more likely to buy that sign and put it in their front yard. And it wasn't so much about selling a sign, because I didn't make that much of a profit. I wanted to get that image out before the election. I want to get that image out as much as possible right before the election. But again, I can't explain it, but there's a scarcity. There's a scarce supply of courage in the church that I've experienced at gun shows. I can tell you that, I don't know if you recall the shooting that took place, I think it's been a year or two now, at the Texas State Fair.
Yes.
Okay. I have a friend who's also in he travels around doing gun shows. He was at that event when the shooting happened. And he told me that there was a guy walking around, big bodybuilder. Guy had to be about 6'2". He was buff. He had a shirt that said, if you mess with the bull, you're going to get the horns. He had a beard. He looked like a special forces operator. When the shooting happened, that same guy ran to his table screaming, trying to find a place to hide. And his wife, who's a little bitty Japanese lady, just could not believe, what she was seeing. That this big guy who looks like an operator, really big buff, he ran away from the shooting.
Well, I don't know.
And the thing that I've experienced, I guess what I'm trying to say, the thing that I've experienced, whether it's in church, at gun shows, is there's a scarce supply of courage. And even you could say, well, I'm just trying to sell a t-shirt. No, I'm trying to make a point where a guy like Millie, compared to a guy like General Patton, is a coward. And we shouldn't be afraid to go out and speak about these issues.
Well, I will tell you, we're moving well beyond provocative or inspiring or funny T-shirts now, because you're illuminating a cultural problem, and I happen to agree with you 100%. I'm not sure that I would be able to narrow it down or boil it down, even in a reductionistic scientific view, to its basest terms, but I believe that you're right. We have a lack of courage. Men have not been encouraged in this culture, Western culture at all anyway. And I would define Western culture by basically Western Europe through most of North America. They haven't been encouraged to be men with the headship of a family, stay in their families that they create, any of those things for a long time. Men haven't, and we have encouraged women to not put any faith or stock in men. I don't need a man. I don't need this, whatever else. And so I don't want to depart too far from the Second Amendment realm in our podcast, because that's the primary mission. But the Second Amendment is part of culture. And so I think we have to be honest, intellectually and otherwise, about what that is and what that isn't. So if you're illuminating to us that you think that men aren't being men, I think that you're right. I know that you're right. I operate a men's ministry, and we, for the specific purpose of helping young men, older men, whoever else, understand what they had ought to do and how they had ought to do it. And so they can view the problems of the world through what I would call a biblical lens, and have the proper response to these things. And they're not getting a lot of encouragement out there. So we're going to have to, grab our bootstraps, yank them up, and do it ourselves, because nobody's going to do that for us. And they shouldn't. This stuff should come from within. When I talk with Second Amendment advocates, they're passionate, not because somebody told them they had ought to be passionate. It's because they realized it through whatever way, whatever means, and they have become passionate themselves. And usually, and I would imagine with your travels, Augie, you'd agree with this. Usually when you come to that realization yourself, you arrive with a great deal of conviction. It can't be dislodged easily from you once you get there. So if wearing a t-shirt, putting a sign in your yard, whatever else, is a proclamation of strength and courage, do it. You should be doing it.
No, you bring up a lot of great points. Two things real quick. There's a former Blackwater employee who lives here in Texas, specifically Seguin. He runs a great consulting group, Second Amendment consulting group, where he trains local security groups. He allows a local sheriff's department to use his facility. He's had the Navy SEALs out there, FBI, all of these alphabet agencies out there, but he runs this facility. Once a quarter, he has a Bible study, and this guy is all Second Amendment. He's a man's man. He has a Bible study out there called Alpha Men's Bible Study. Huh. And it's all 2A guys that hang around, and he brings in usually 2A related guys that, and I hate to use this term, but I'll just say they're alpha males. These guys are some bad dudes. I mean, good guys, good Christian men, but we discuss what it means to be an alpha male. And, we go straight from the Bible to discuss what it means to be an alpha male. We'll have examples, real life examples of people that we've known in our lives that were alpha males, people that stood up when they needed to. But you bring up another point is you bring up reductionism, and about how, I do reduce a message to a t-shirt, because sometimes when you're out at Walmart, you're out at Costco, you only have a minute to send a message to someone. So they are, the images are reduced, the message is reduced. I mean, you bring up a really good point about that. It's very, I would say it's a good way to market, but it's a good way to get a message across.
I find that, like my wife said to me, and she's right about it, not that I'm too concerned about it, I am somewhat concerned about it, but there's a risk associated with that too, because a lot of times, or too often, I should say, so that's the better way to categorize it. Too often people will take the wrong things away from the statement that your shirt or sign or whatever else may indicate. Now, instead of actually thinking critical, I'm going to use the Socratic method for the deduction of this T-shirt. What things have to be true in order for, or support it in order for this T-shirt to have truth? Nobody ever does that. We don't even think like that. Now that's a long form answer really to something that should happen just like that, but too few do that. So they'll look at a shirt and they'll immediately be offended. And then of course, because they're offended, they pivot from being offended to asserting victim status. And then from victim status, because they're going to assert that you've done something to them that was inexcusable or whatever else, or degrading, whatever. Once they assert victim status, that allows them two options, and they usually exercise one or both. You owe them now because you've done something to them, or they're going to volley into a position of power over you because you should be punished. You know what I mean? All
Oh, yeah.
from a t-shirt that makes the statement that they should have said, and rubbed their temple just a little bit and thought about it. So this is the kind of thing that I like the most. And if I see t-shirts, graphic tees, these things that are well designed and well chosen, I see them as being the physical manifestation of what we see on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, for these little shorts, these little reels, these things that are 1 minute or less, that throw something out there that is either entertaining or thought-provoking or mystifying somehow. And so it can't, I don't ever want to see it go away. I know that sounds, some people listening to this right now won't understand that, but I'm like, yes, I want to see, and this is mostly a thing in America. If you travel the world, you don't see a lot of t-shirts that have something on them. You know, you go to Eastern Europe, and what do you see? Adidas tracksuits,
Right.
and that kind of stuff. When you go to Southeast Asia, you see them wearing the stuff that the local sweatshops are building that were seconds or whatever else. But they don't wear a political statement on their chest unless it's something they could get cheap. It's not something that they chose specifically.
Right.
Americans do that. And I
think it is an American phenomenon.
Oh, without a doubt.
But,
and it stems from the First Amendment, no question.
But I would suggest, and I'm not a scientist, I'm just a dumb infantryman, retired after 24 years in the Army. I got knocked out a few times, so I'm running a little slow up here in the noggin. But I would tell you that I would say that there is a direct correlation between, well, let's look at the incident that happened in Colorado.
Okay.
How many men were standing around filming?
I haven't looked at the footage, but it was a lot.
How many men? Now, I wasn't there, so I can't tell you, but I would say there's a direct correlation between courage, and I'm not trying to focus on my t-shirt. I'm focusing on your ability or your desire to be confrontational, to take a bold step, to make a bold statement. There's a correlation between that, your willingness to be bold, and your willingness to carry an arm and use it when needed. There's a lack of boldness in our society. You had men out there recording instead of attacking this guy.
Yeah.
Why? Why is that?
Well,
and that is a Second Amendment issue. Why weren't there more men out there carrying weapons? I could tell you, I live here in San Antonio, Texas. Just about all of my friends carry, and I would think there aren't too many of them that would have just stood aside and not have done something. And there were a lot of men out there, for whatever reason, maybe because they were beaten down and they were told, hey, you cannot display your toxic masculinity. Don't do anything. So instead they decided to videotape and not attack this guy. He was yelling. You could watch every video. The guy was yelling for several minutes. Nobody went in and tried to attack him.
Yeah. I did, as I said, I didn't see all the footage that's available. I'm certain that I didn't, but I did see some of it. And the other thing about this is, you were so right on the Second Amendment premise here, because I follow Colorado closely. I visit there a lot, have owned property there, own property now. And the laws that they have passed in the recent month or two, banning all method of weapon and capacities, you name it, it's horrible. They have stepped into Illinois or California or New York or New Jersey status. They are running against the culture, because the culture is coming around and saying, we're not interested in things that are inherently lies. Right. We're interested in things that are inherently true. Either that or we're waking up to it. We don't know what we want yet, but we know what we're being fed is a lie, and we don't want that. I think that we're seeing that, and I'm very pleased about that trend, or a little bit of that trend. Anyway, when you look at what's gone on in Colorado, and Boulder, it's the epicenter in the Midwest, if you will, or certainly in the Rockies, of all things stupid. It just is. And so is it a surprise to me that a guy could go out there and rant and have I don't know what they were, kerosene, gas, I don't know what they were, but basically some sort of Molotov cocktail, rant around and get rid of it. And then, oh, by the way, you're going to throw that stuff and burn elderly people. And as you said, people are going to stand around and whip out their cameras so they can video it and live stream it, but they won't intercede. I listened to some of those guys talk about what they were doing afterwards and how horrific it was and how they were trying to get water on and for these people. But I will admit that I was thinking to myself, man, if we'd have had an ounce of prevention, how much different this would have been. Now, granted, the news would not have covered it, and we may not have even known about it, Augie. But the alternative that we got here in this result was horrific, and nobody stood up that I'm aware of to stop this thing, and that's a very, very big problem for me.
Well, you've had Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman on your show a few times, and I've read his book. It's pretty much required reading in the Army, especially amongst the officer corps. And one of the things that you understand about being a warfighter, about going to combat, is training. You have to get it in your mind. You have to decide beforehand that if A happens, I'm going to do B. And if you're being taught that you can't do A because it's toxic, then you're never going to do B. If you're being taught that you're a toxic male and you shouldn't be bold and you shouldn't be brash, then when an attack like this occurs, you're likely not going to act. And it's something that we're taught in the military. You're taught all the time to react spontaneously to, an event. But again, if you're taught in the military, if you're taught as a police officer, if you're taught as a man, you should not react, quote, air quotes, like a man. Then when that event actually occurs and you're given the opportunity to defend your family, you're probably not going to react because you have not trained yourself in your mind, to react in a certain way. I'm good friends with Stephen Williford here in Texas, from Sutherland Springs. And if you meet Stephen, I grew up in New York City. I've been very grateful to move down to Texas, where I'm surrounded by people who've been shooting all of their lives, who've been hunting all of their lives. I did not grow up like that. I had to surround myself with men, with a gun culture. I had to surround myself with people like that. And I'm just grateful for the guy. He grew up in a gun culture in the outskirts of San Antonio. And when he heard the shots coming from his church in Sutherland Springs, he reacted.
Yeah.
There was no second thought in his mind. How is my church going to react? How are my neighbors going to react? He didn't think about that. He had already considered in his mind and thought in his mind, hey, if this happens, I'm going to react.
Yeah.
And, he grew up culturally like that. And I just like to, I like to say that these people that are reluctant to simply make a bold statement. And again, it's not about my t-shirts. It's about the statement behind the shirt.
Yes.
If you're reluctant to go out in public and, and wear something that's questionable, politically charged, whatever, if you're afraid to do that, I don't know. I don't know if when the proverbial, hits the fan, if you would be willing to go out and take care of business. I just don't know.
Well, it boils down to, okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, the gentleman, I forget the guy's name, the Marine in the New York City subway. He was trained, obviously, to react, not to sit back and videotape stuff. There's just so many examples of men who have stepped up, regardless of the cost. And again, I think it just goes back to you have to put it in your mind beforehand. If this happens, I'm going to react this way. When I go to church, I'm always packing heat.
Yeah.
Always. And I'm always looking around. If this happens, then I'm going to react this way. There's just no second thoughts about it.
Well, that's a matter of, you talked about training, and I think that that's the right word, but included in training, and maybe I think I can make the argument that preceding training is the mental preparation. I talk with my wife about this. I talk with friends about this. I talk with my children about this. I want you to mentally prepare. I want you to think through, if, like you said, if A happens, what's B? What's your response? And if B's out the window, then do you have a contingency for that? So, I mean, right down to little things. I've talked with, and before I go too far, we had Stephen up here in Iowa for Second Amendment Day, and he spoke with our group, and then he spoke at our pack supper, and he got to relay his story and the horror of it and everything from beginning to end. I mean, we're talking about a short little guy that's barefoot running around doing what he can.
He looks like Santa Claus.
Yeah. I mean, he and I compete for that kind of thing, right? Okay. I just happen to be taller than him, but no, it was really inspiring to see that he was quite willing to not ask, will I get hurt or what's going to happen to me? But whatever's happening is bad, and I've got to stop this.
Right.
It was no more complex than that. And it wasn't a moment. I sensed from how he spoke, it wasn't an issue where he deciphered these things, Augie. It was automatic.
Right.
That's bad, and I've got to stop what's bad.
That's right.
Great. Go do that.
It was automatic.
Yeah. So when we go back to I teach my kids these things, I'm like, okay, we're going to go in Home Depot and know where the car is at. That's number one. Number two, when we walk in there, I want you to look around, and when we get back here, when we're done and we leave, I'm going to ask you some things. I want you to be able to tell me the descriptions and the name tags on 2 or 3 of the people that you ran into there with the orange aprons or whatever else. I want you to tell me where the secondary exits were. If you didn't see them, tell me where you think they're likely to be. And if you went out the door we came in, or the secondary exit that you found or assumed, what direction would you turn to get back to the car? Maybe there's smoke in your eyes, maybe something bad, I don't know. But how would you do that? I quiz the kids, not so that they'll be paranoid or silly, and they're not. But I want them to be situationally aware and then have a plan for egress or whatever it may be. And then, of course, there's a threat associated with that. If you're not going to pay attention to this and this isn't important to you, I'm going to be okay with that as long as you realize you're not coming back. You can sit in the car next time and twiddle your thumbs because you don't get to play on your phone when we're in there either. So you can participate and learn a few things or you don't, and that's up to you. And what that has manifested itself in is kids along with their friends that come along. And now those friends are teaching their parents, hey, when we go in here, how am I going to get out? This was a fun one. And I'll shut up and let you talk. But we walked in a Subway, and I asked my daughter, I'm like, how are you going to get out of here? And she's like, through the door. And I said, oh, the door's blocked. And I said, what's next? And she said, well, if I go back behind the sandwich counter, there's probably a back door. I said, yeah. In this building, actually, there doesn't happen to be. I know that already because I've been here a lot of times. But that's a good instinct. And if that doesn't work, how are you going to get out of here? And so I'm like, she was kind of stumped. So I said, well, take a chair and swing it at all these windows that are running from knee high all the way there. Break one out. Go up through the false ceiling and over and down into the building that's attached to this, whatever. I don't care. But all these things are on the menu, and it changes people so that they can, when they're situationally aware. I'm telling you, it was a net. It wasn't something that made her paranoid or timid. What it did was it emboldened her, Augie. She was more confident because she wasn't concerned with being inside of this little kill box. She was like, I can get out of here and I can take some people with me. And that's what I tell her. I'm like, listen, if you go somewhere with your buddies, have a plan to get you and them out. Don't go out by yourself. Take somebody with you, and that's the mental prep associated with being an American, being a good citizen. And it's certainly the mental prep that men need to have for themselves, for the people they're around, their families, whoever they're dating, their wives, whatever else, somebody else's wife standing beside them, whatever it may be. And it's been eroded. It's not gone, but it's been chipped away out and corroded and lessened over time. And we need to build that back up. So I'm right there 100% with you.
And I wonder, a Bible verse that comes to mind is Proverbs 28:1, and it says, "The righteous are as bold as lions."
Mhm.
And I wonder if, being bold, whether it's public, whether it's, in your private life, I think through reading the scriptures, I think that's training. That's how you become bold, by reading the scriptures. It doesn't come automatically. When you go out to train, if you do get into a situation, training is extremely important. But I think being bold as a believer, you have to practice that too. And practice comes through praying, hanging out with other believers, and through reading scripture.
Mm-hmm.
And that I don't want to deviate too much, but we have a lot of churches here in San Antonio. Very few where pastors themselves carry. There's one pastor whose church I love to visit. It's about 45 minutes away. You might have heard of him, Doug Giles.
No, I apologize.
He's an author and a minister, and I'd love to go to the church because he's packing heat from the pulpit.
Okay.
He doesn't put that responsibility off on a hired security guard, and I would love to see more pastors packing heat from the pulpit. They are the shepherds. They're responsible for shepherding the flock, and it's just very refreshing to go to the church and he's packing heat from the pulpit. And I like to see that more in certain churches. And I don't know, it's to each his own. There's a preference for each church, and of course, if you live in a larger city, you're probably more likely to encounter a lot of people that just don't appreciate the Second Amendment as much as we do.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think that there is sometimes a hiccup for people. They will say, well, how can a self-proclaimed Christian advocate carrying and killing people? And I'm like, no, hold on a minute. First of all, there are biblical cases for self-defense that are very easy to understand, number one. And number two, nobody that I know or have ever met says, I want to carry so that I can kill people. I have never heard that statement in my life. Never. I don't even know anybody that thinks that way. But there are lots and lots of people, the overwhelming majority, who are quite willing to say, I take self-defense seriously, and I'm willing to stop a threat. But what they don't follow through and say, and which is implied because they know it, but the person listening may not understand, is those people then, when the threat is stopped, they volley to life-saving mode. And they do. They do tourniquets, and they do chest compressions, and they do these things often because they're not trying to end anyone. They're trying to end the savage nature of what was going on, or end this threat. And I think that's an important distinction to make, Augie, because I don't think that just like your T-shirt inspiring somebody to think, well, it might inspire somebody to fly off the handle and believe stupid things. So we've got to flesh this thing out. You mentioned scripture earlier that encourages people to be bold from the premise of righteousness. Well, you know what's also inherently incumbent upon these people? Humility. So if you're gonna wear a T-shirt as a billboard sign, as a mobile billboard sign, you are wholly responsible to be able to defend it and explain it. And so I think that you carry that responsibility with you. If you're going to wear a T-shirt that's provocative or potentially provocative, I think you've got to be able to explain it to somebody so that you can quell the stupid. I really do. Because like you said, you may have people that, like, I don't like that. Well, I see that you're having a guttural reaction to my shirt. Let's talk about that. What are you thinking, and what are you feeling or thinking as a result of having read this? That might be the segue into a conversation, possibly, often not, I concede, but possibly into the illumination of somebody's mind. And that's the humility associated with that bold stemming from righteousness.
Well, you bring up a good point. I think I need to think a lot more about humility, because like I said, I grew up in New York City. I grew up fighting all the time, and I could be brash, but I appreciate you mentioning that. I do need to sit down and consider humility a lot more often. But you bring up a good point. I have a number of pro-life T-shirts, some that I don't have on my website yet, and you may have this problem in Iowa. We definitely have it in Texas, but we have a lot of Californians moving here. Fortunately, I think the breakdown is about 65 to 35%, where the Californians moving here are conservative. But this weekend, I was at a gun show, and some guy took exception with one of my T-shirts. It's a pro-life shirt, and it opened up the opportunity for me to talk to him and show him actual photos. I keep a lot of photos, and this may not be for everyone, but it is for me, because I think that God has called me to be like this. But I keep a couple of photos on my phone of aborted babies. And I said, you have an issue with this shirt. What is it about the shirt that you have an issue with? And he went down the liberal talking points, women's right to choose. Well, I said, well, I showed him the photos and I said, do you think this is right? You know what he told me when he saw the photos?
What?
He goes, you're disgusting. How dare you have those photos on your phone? Here a minute prior, he was defending the right to do this. When he saw the actual photos of what he, what he believes in, he said I was disgusting for having those photos on my phone. And then he promptly walked away. Another shirt that I have, they always bring up, opportunities. Hippies still suck is another T-shirt. Well, I'll have a lot of young people come up to my table and they'll say, well, that shirt offends me. Well, why is that? I said, because they'll tell me, well, I'm a hippie. I said, no, you're not. Were you there in 1968, 1969 in San Francisco or LA, spitting and throwing garbage at veterans returning from Vietnam? They said, no, that wasn't me. Obviously, I'm too young. I said, well, this shirt isn't for you. It's for those people who treated Vietnam veterans that were returning back from Vietnam this way. And it provides me an opportunity to explain to them why I created that T-shirt. So anyway, lots of opportunities to educate, be bold. But it goes back to the abortion one was really enlightening, how that guy was so quick to blame me for those images rather than take responsibility, for him supporting that.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that we're talking about this, because every one of these things that we do, especially in the public realm, have potential consequences. And if you're, and I know that you know this, we're establishing a rapport, and we've got a baseline here. So I think we understand one another. But if you're going to wear a T-shirt simply to provoke, but you're not willing to talk about it, or you're not willing to visit with somebody or suffer whatever comes for a reaction whenever wearing the T-shirt, then you're either silly or you're arrogant. And there's not room for either if you're going to wear a shirt like that. You've got to be the antithesis of silly or arrogant. And so you wouldn't think that comes with a responsibility, but they do. I was at a graduation reception for some friends out here in rural Iowa. And of course, there's a lot of, there's cowboy hats and lots of boots and great big pickups with bull bumpers on them, right? That's typical.
I love it.
Yeah, so that's the way that it is. Further you get to the city, the more that is, and it's there, and I enjoy it. But I saw these young men, these graduating seniors or recently graduated or juniors, and most, not all, but most at this graduation reception held out in this great big machine shed, right? There's planters and combines and stuff pushed up against the wall. That's where they had it. I loved it. But most all of them were wearing provocative T-shirts, full of swearing and stuff that it was stuff just to make you mad. I mean, you know what I'm saying? And I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, okay, I know why you wore that, because I was ignorant and silly when I was 18 also. Well, far dumber than these kids probably. And I thought to myself, I wonder how they're going to defend that. I wonder if somebody that they respected walked up to them and said, I'd like for you to explain what you're wearing and why you chose it. Well, they're not. They're just being provocative because that's what young kids do. But they're not able to do the back end. They're not able to talk about what they put on or why, because they're stupid. But yeah, I'm glad that they don't stay that way. You know what I mean?
I don't want, I talked to my wife about this several times. When I have a new idea for a t-shirt, she goes, why are you doing that? I said, because we need to talk about it. That's why.
There you go.
We need to have this discussion. And I don't want anyone to think that I create these shirts just to be provocative. No, I can't tell you, Michael. I was at a gun show in Central Texas, and a frail old lady comes up to my table and she tells me, thank you so much. I said, for what? She goes, I thought I was the only person that thought the way you did. Well, because we don't only have provocative shirts, we have shirts that celebrate American pride, the nation's founding. And she goes, thank you so much for being here. I thought I was the only one that thought this way. I thought I was the only one that cared about these issues, and thank you. I'm like, I'm just selling t-shirts. She goes, no, you're doing more than just selling t-shirts. So that was really kind of that lady. I had a shirt that says on the back, it says no apologies, with a beautiful American flag. An American Airlines pilot ran up to me, stopped me, and said, where did you get that shirt? I said, well, I make them. He goes, thank you so much for wearing it. And you could see the long sleeve version right there. Yeah. I'm like, why are you thanking me for wearing this? He goes, because people are so timid to just be proud of their country. We've been beaten down so much. This is an American Airlines pilot. Now, I wish I could find a pilot because he didn't go to my website and buy one, but that's another issue. But, it's amazing some of the reactions I get. And I guess, the bottom line is I enjoy more than anything else, people just thanking me for being not just provocative, but being bold. And again, it brings up many, many times I do have the opportunity to have a discussion with people about my apparel. And I tell this to a lot of folks. I'm a retired military member. I have a pretty good, pension. My wife has a very good job. I do this stuff out of love. I love going to gun shows. I love meeting patriotic people. I was just at the NRA show, and I met Billy Wilson. Obviously, I have a lot of opportunities to make friends and meet a lot of good patriots all over this country. And I tell you, one of the great things is that I meet people from all races that love America. They love what what the shirts say. And you could see there's people from all different backgrounds there. And there goes a picture of Stephen, me and Santa Claus there in the lower left-hand corner.
Yes.
But I meet people from all different backgrounds, and they're just, man, it's just great to see people celebrating America, being bold, and not being afraid to, stand up for boldness and righteousness.
Yep.
That's one of the things I enjoy about this. And if God is gracious enough to allow this business to take off, then so be it. But right now, my wife and I just have a blast going around the country, meeting people like you, like Billy. I find opportunities to help veterans, to help various organizations. I help out local politicians when I can, but I get such a kick out of helping nonprofits and helping people out, doing fundraisers for veterans groups. There's a small children's hospital in Corpus Christi that we donate through our company that we give back to. So I'm just very grateful for this opportunity. Most importantly, not most importantly, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity to talk to people, even people that don't agree with me. And that case in point about the abortion issue this weekend was excellent. The guy, unfortunately, he walked away angry at me because I, put up a mirror to his face and showed him that what he was supporting was just evil.
Yeah. Well, you don't know, I don't know. and it's exceedingly rare that we'd know the end to that story. But he may have walked away and thought about that later.
Yeah.
I have had a couple times where I've talked with somebody about the Second Amendment or a misconception that they may have had, and I've worked very hard to be, respectful and while still challenging that kind of thing, because I haven't traditionally done a good job of that. There's been a great
Amen.
portion of my life where I've been very in your face, which is okay. But the fact of the matter is it probably doesn't bring around any resolution. It's
No,
okay.
you're right about that.
You can draw a line in the sand, but once you do that, I had a mentor tell me that never talk about values or opinions, and I'm like, why? And he said, well, they're the same thing. When you enter into any argument and you talk about my values, your values, you might as well just say your opinion and my opinion. When you do that, whether you realize it, you've drawn a metaphorical line in the sand that neither one of you are willing to cross. So where is it you go from there? And so he's like, always bring it back if you can to something that's this is inherently good for culture. This is inherently good for children. This is inherently good for that. Find your common ground and then establish that rapport, and then work with them to get them to understand your perspective, and then prove to them that you understand theirs, and then follow it out logically. And sometimes, Augie, sometimes that's actually worked, and people come back later and said, I'm really glad we had that conversation. I've been reconsidering this. It's rare, I concede, but
it is rare.
But if we don't make those efforts, then what are we doing? You might as well just walk down the street with your shirt and never talk with anybody for any reason. And I don't like that isolationist idea. So tell us how we can get Grumpy G.I gear. Walk us through that.
You can go to our website, grumpygigear.com. Some days it seems like that website is a work in progress, but you can find all of our apparel on that website. We do have a really cool Facebook page. You can find us. Those are primarily both ways, Facebook and our website. And I'd also like to tell you, if you have a special event coming up, as I told you, my wife and I are doing well financially. Apart from Grumpy G.I gear, if you have an event coming up where you need some very, very well priced shirts, I would love to help you, especially if it's dealing with children. I just helped out a GOA. They just have they have a summer camp for some children up in I believe it's South Dakota. I just helped them out, got them a couple of t-shirts. But if you have any events, give me a holler, send me an email, or send me you can even call me and I'll respond. But I'll give you a good deal, especially if it's dealing with veterans, children, or any needy organization. I'll be willing to help you out. Fantastic. And all I ask for is for a decent price. All I ask for, actually a very, very good price, better than most competitors. All I ask is for a shout out. We enjoy doing stuff like that.
I think the reciprocity is easy. I hope that people consider that and take you up on your offer. It's very kind. So if we go to grumpygigear.com, we can land on your site. We can peruse through everything, check out the shirts, what they say, what they don't say, the sizes, get everything in our carts, check out. I'm assuming any method of payment that's common will we go through. I found a couple things here I like. My daughter is actually at Bible camp way out in Colorado right now.
Nice.
I'll catch up with her later this week. But she pops through the shop routinely and look over my shoulder at stuff like this. And she is classic for saying, "Oh, I'll bet you that'd look good on me," which is her way of saying, I have an expectation that you buy that for me, Daddy. And I'm a softie. It works every time. So I'll leave this up here on the screen, or I'll have it when she walks by, which is bait. And we'll see what she wants to buy, and I'll get something coming. So go to Grumpy G.I gear, grumpygigear.com, and pick out something that you'd like to have, share it with your friends, let them know where you got it, so that we can support people that support us. Now, before we go, I must ask, I think that I can make an assumption about why you chose the name Grumpy GI Gear, but just to make sure that I'm not wrong, why don't you tell us?
How can you tell?
You don't look that angry to me. Come on, man.
I tell my wife every morning, I said, please do not talk to me before 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Even when I was working at DOD, I would show up at the office and everyone knew to stay away from me until 9 o'clock. I don't wake up until 9. But yeah, my children gave me that. All three of my kids are military brats. And, you know, I deployed quite a bit. I was gone quite a bit. And they always said, Dad, you were so grumpy. So when we were going through, my wife and I sat down and we were going through a list of names for the company. That name just kept coming up, Grumpy. And I have to admit, you know, God is working. I'm a work in progress. I've been a believer since I was about 17 years old. I'm 58 now, and I'm still a work in progress. I think I would say about 60% of the time I'm grumpy, and I'm working on that. And I mean, this conversation has been enlightening. You talking to me about having humility, and that's that point taken. But keep an eye out because I have some really good shirts coming up again. And I hope to run into you into some of the other events coming up. I try to attend as many Pro 2A events as possible. I've gone to GOA, gone to NRA, and like I said, the best part about it, I know 58 isn't very old. I'm getting up there in age, and my body isn't working as great as it used to, but it's so worth going to these events and meeting people like you, meeting people like Billy Wilson, and just meeting people that love America, love the Second Amendment. And I'm just so happy at the diversity at these events. It's not just, white Southern hicks. It's not like that at all. It's people from all backgrounds that love America, love the Second Amendment. And I appreciate what you do.
As I
And I thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, I'm so glad. It's been, this isn't work when you volunteer among the volunteers that I do. This isn't work. Yes, it takes time, but these are pleasures. I mean, there are scores of people that I volunteer with that I love dearly. These people are fantastic. They work hard, but they do it out of passion. They do it out of the right place. They make the occasional mistake just like you and I do. But I got to tell you, this is fun. And so when you can push a movement forward, when you can share with people, when you can take on some of their burden too, because some of the conversations that we have are very tough. And when you can do that compassionately and with empathy, man alive, that's the human condition working well, not poorly. I love it. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for what you do. I appreciate your work over the years and your dedication, your service. I don't say that out of obligation. I mean it. Thank you for those things. So
thank you.
It's been a great,
I really appreciate it.
Grumpy GI Gear. I am butchering things this morning. I tell you what, maybe I needed that cup of coffee too. I don't know. GrumpyGIGear.com. And we thank you, Augie.
Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it. God bless.